So welcome, Perennial Pride listeners. Thanks for joining me today. I think you're gonna really enjoy this conversation having here today. Our guest is Carolyn Tormey, who's a career ownership coach. I love that description. I think my kids could use that these days. Working for the Entrepreneur Source. And she's a franchising expert. She's a coach that really helps people to investigate whether franchises are right for them and traverse the landscape of franchises, which could be very fascinating to learn about, but maybe daunting for people getting into it. And Carolyn really helps people to investigate and see how it could fit into their future and their lives and their careers. So Carolyn, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Tom. I'm really happy to be a part of your podcast.
Awesome. I think you're going to bring some tremendous value. And, this podcast is really meant to help, just broaden people's minds around options and secure freedom in their lives as much as they want it, right? And one of the big areas, certainly in our world, is just our careers, right? Our jobs, whether it's our working for someone or creating our own jobs, like as self-employed or starting a business. So this is today, hopefully you'll get a sense of this option. So Carolyn, tell our listeners here, just how did you get into this space and into this coaching environment?
Well, it was a bit serendipitous, and this is one way I can really relate to my clients because I work with a lot of people that are in a career transition themselves and just reevaluating the next phase of their career. And that's where I was. I had taken many years off to take care of my family and raise my children. Very fortunate that I could do that. But there came a point where I was ready to go back into the workforce or have a career again. I knew that I did not want to have another corporate job situation. And I thought about franchising, but at that point, I really didn't know much about franchising. And I had looked at some brick and mortar food-related businesses. I realized that they weren't the right fit for me. And I was still searching for an opportunity, but there was certain criteria that was really important to me. And then I came across this business, and it just checked off all the boxes. It was professional. I could work from home. It had a lot of flexibility. I could help others. It had the right opportunity in terms of, earning potential. So there was it really fit what I was looking for. And this is exactly what I help my clients do.
No, that's great. Yeah. And then with that in mind, trying to find what fits you in terms of what you want out of life and business and work, that's really the heart of a lot of this stuff. And certainly what we preach on this podcast is to explore that.
Well, that's so important. I think people don't really think that much about what their personal goals are when they think of a career and certainly a business. I think more often when people think about going into business, they think about what is my past experience or what do I really love to do? What's my passion? And that's all fine and good. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that business is going to deliver the results that they ultimately need.
Yeah. And that's where you have to explore that. So let's maybe for folks maybe less familiar with a franchise, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously, when you think about it, I have a job. If that's easy, I work for somebody, and then you can start your own business from scratch, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever that is. And so tell us, one-on-one here. What is a franchise? What is that exactly?
Well, it's really just a way of expanding a business or a brand. I think we're all familiar with the way a corporation would do that, where they have employees in place at their various locations and they expand that way. But with franchising, there is a corporate entity, but they're expanding their brand through a network of owners that are local. So all franchise, organizations are based on this network of local operators.
Right. So this is a way for expansion for sure. And then they can own their own sort of areas, right, and territories.
Right. And they have skin in the game. So they've had to make an investment in the franchise. So their investment is an upfront franchise fee. And then they also pay ongoing monthly royalties that are typically based on a percentage of their gross revenue. But for that investment, they're getting things from the franchise. They're able to benefit from a proven business plan and all the branding and technology, trademarks, buying power, and of course the training, the initial training that they go through, as well as the ongoing support that's provided not only by the corporate support group, but also that is provided by the network of owners. They're actually, in many cases, I would say in most cases, a very valuable source of mentorship and support.
Yeah, because you hear all those stats around it, small businesses and how many fail within the first 5 years because you're trying to solidify this process and infrastructure, all those things you sort of mentioned to test through and hopefully succeed and then kind of propel. But these are proven sort of businesses that have been successful and profitable, and you're just now expanding and taking those same pieces of the infrastructure and plan together and applying them elsewhere.
Right. It really helps one who is interested in being an entrepreneur. It helps them ramp up a business without having to come up with that idea and without having to go through all the trial and error that one typically goes through in starting a business. There are so many people out there that have the skill set to own and operate a business, but they're not necessarily what I would call those pure entrepreneurs that really are passionate and driven. They have a certain calling, I guess you could say, in terms of starting a business. I think those people are few and far between. But yet many of us think of how wonderful it would be to own their own business, and you want to be self-sufficient and have control over your destiny. Many people would like that, but they just don't really know what business they would want to start. So I think a franchise is a wonderful opportunity because you can essentially shop for a business practically because there are so many options out there. Now, it can also be overwhelming, but I think that just franchising in general for people who have an entrepreneurial spirit but aren't able to or just don't have that idea, it's a great way to be able to own and operate a business.
Yeah, because we talk about too, and in terms of investing, right? I get questions often like, where do I invest? And often just say, what do you know? What do you are passionate about? What is it that you want to wake up each day to get better at and learn more about? That's probably where I'd rather you invest more of your time because you're going to enjoy it more and you're going to get more out of it, just personally and fulfillment wise. And this, in businesses, we can hopefully control more of what happens. Maybe not entirely, but more so than if I only invest in, say, a mutual fund with companies that I don't have any vested interest in personally. I can't control them. So this is a way at least to gain some level of control. So tell me more about, for someone who's thinking about getting and exploring this, like, who are you typically seeing these days in terms of those who are, really good fit for getting into franchises? What's their kind of background coming to you?
Well, I think who is a good fit for franchising, it's certainly very broad. The type of skills that franchise companies are looking for are skills that a lot of people develop when they, throughout their corporate career. So skills in management, team building, project management, sales management. These are the skills that are easily transferable into operating a business. Because with most franchises, as the franchise owner, you're not actually the one that is performing the service or providing the product. You're not typically working in your business, but you're working on your business. You're going to be the CEO, you're going to be the person in the management role. And there's certainly some opportunities where you could be more hands-on, but just generally speaking, franchise owners are managing their business.
Right. And from that perspective, it's certainly key to be able to have some of those skills because you have to maybe hire people, right, and manage people, right, and that's probably kind of the core responsibilities because you're not, you have the support from sort of the franchisor, right, to help building out the vision and even this business itself. Would that be accurate?
Mm-hmm. And certainly there are some franchise opportunities where you don't have to have employees, of course, but in many cases you are in the manager role for sure.
And so on that note, because we talk often a lot in this podcast, people building passive streams of income, and some of that stuff is, even though they call it passive, there's some activity involved.
Right.
It's not like I just can flip a switch. So, for those who are maybe seeking out passive streams of income, in a sense, could there be certain franchise opportunities that kind of fit that desire?
There are, and we're actually seeing more and more of those, and not only semi-passive, but we're seeing franchise companies develop completely passive opportunities for franchise owners. And I think that part of that is because we're seeing a lot of people that are just looking for that type of ownership. I work with a lot of clients who want to keep their job, and yet they want to have an additional stream of income for themselves. I think that with the environment that we're in, just from a corporate job standpoint, people have learned that it might be a good idea to have that alternative revenue stream, and also maybe even be able to plan an exit strategy for themselves. They can start their business while they're working, get their business up and running, and manage it semi-passively. And then at some point, maybe when they're ready, they could leave their corporate career and either have more full-time involvement with their business, or even do something else, maybe start another business. So we're seeing a lot of that. And also people who are looking for more absentee. There's actually absentee opportunities where the franchise corporate group will manage the business on behalf of the franchise owner. Now they're paying a fee for that, but it's an option that really wasn't available years ago.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, I kind of equate a little bit too, because we often talk about real estate investing too, and there's actually a turnkey investment sort of approach that is now available for people who want to get into it but don't want to manage any of it, the rental property. So it sounds like it may have some similarities.
Yes, it does sound similar.
Yeah, because you get the benefits of like a real estate ownership and tax benefit and passive income, but you have someone managing it for you.
Right.
So you can kind of have that absentee sort of approach,
Well,
especially early on.
yes. Well, and I think just going back to comparing owning a franchise business to other types of investments, I think that something else that we have been finding recently is that people want to diversify. They like the idea of diversifying in an investment that they do have control over. It's not just hoping that the investment goes up. So a lot of people are diversifying in a business so that they can have some control, even if it's semi-passive or passive ownership. They feel like it's just a good way to diversify.
No, agreed. Yeah, and then because I often get asked questions around, especially with people who are working jobs only. Their biggest complaint, at least one of them, is I'm constantly paying taxes, way more taxes every year. I'm as successful as I'm getting. It's creating a bigger tax burden. And I said, one of the cool places that, obviously our friends at the IRS incentives to do is to start businesses, right? To help give employment. And this is one way, to your point, to diversify that and potentially, get some support from a tax perspective, right? Too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always something that I encourage people to at least explore, right? Because there are some benefits to it. So, tell me a little bit more. Franchising sounds great. So, tell me. I'm curious to hear. I've heard some just horror stories around franchises, and and this just like any industry, whether it's investments and such. But tell me, how do you help people sort of get the most benefit out of this and kind of avoid those sort of pitfalls? And what have you seen?
Right, there are those stories, and it's really unfortunate that they're out there. But it's interesting though, because when you just compare the success of franchise businesses to independent businesses, there's a huge difference there. I think that with independent businesses, it's a pretty low probability that they're going to succeed after 5 years. And with franchising, they actually experience a very strong success rate. I think that there is in franchising what we call the 20-60-20 rule, and this is a generalization, so it's going to vary from franchise system to franchise system. But what that states is that, generally speaking, in any given system, about 20% of the franchise owners are going to outperform that system. 60% are going to perform as expected, and 20% are going to underperform. And underperforming doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go out of business, but they're not going to perform as expected. So I think right there that shows that franchising in general is very successful, but it's still hard work. I think sometimes people feel like, oh, I'll invest in a franchise and it's just going to run itself. And that's not the case, because in franchising, you are starting a business from the ground up. You certainly have a system to follow, and you have help and support and extensive training, but it's still a lot of hard work. And I think sometimes people miss that aspect of it. And believe it or not, some people just don't follow the system that they have invested in, which sounds surprising, but that's true. So that could be another reason why maybe people don't succeed. But I think the other thing sometimes people don't think about and maybe aren't honest with themselves in terms of what they bring to the table. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to get out there and be on the front end in a sales role? If that's not something you're comfortable with, that wouldn't be a good fit for you in a franchise. So, and you just have to take that into account and really be honest with yourself as well. And not just think about, hey, what's the hottest trend? What's the hottest concept out there? Because with franchising, it's very individual. A great business for one person might not be a good fit for another. And I think that's something that's important for people to think about.
Yeah, and that's where I'm sure your expertise helps people at least sort of think through that a bit more, because because I look at something like this, and like you said, like starting up a business, most businesses are not like profitable from day one.
Right, it takes some time.
Yeah, you're building this up, and this has some long-term, like we often preach about thinking long-term. I mean, this is not like for most cases, and you tell me if I'm wrong, like it's going to take some time and have some long-term thinking around it, because you got to grow this business. And to your point, systems are there, but you got to make sure you follow them and sort of stay on top of the business as a whole, right?
Right. It's important to understand that there's a ramp-up period and that can vary from franchise to franchise, and it's important to be well capitalized.
Well, actually, I was thinking that note too, in terms of for most franchises that or people would consider. I guess it will vary, but it still will require some level of capitalization from franchisee, right?
Yes.
Up front. Well, tell me a little bit more about what that kind of typically looks like.
Well, I think I could start with investment level, because I think that many people equate franchising to brick and mortar and fast food because they're so visible. These are the types of franchises we see all the time. And they're very expensive. That's a huge investment. But you can invest as little as $50,000 total investment for the franchise. And then, of course, you can spend over $1 million. I would say that more of a typical investment range is between maybe $75,000 and $200,000. There's a lot of businesses that fit within that range for the total investment required, which doesn't necessarily mean that that's the amount of personal capital that someone would have to put up with or to put up. Many of our clients, I would say 9% of them use some type of financing. Very common, people use their retirement funds, a rollover product, to invest in their business. SBA loans are also quite common, as well as just savings and even angel investors.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And if you look over, just more of a curiosity over time, are you starting to see franchising growing, slowing down? Like, what's that kind of look like broadly? Is this an area that people are getting into more or expanding? Like, I just have no idea.
No, I think it continues to grow and evolve. We're constantly seeing growth into new areas. I would say what I'm observing now is a lot of innovation and new opportunities in health and wellness. That's something we're seeing a lot of. And just franchise brands and concepts that are incorporating some really great technology into their business model, just in terms of marketing and overall management, call centers offering the corporate entity the ability to support their franchise owners in some really interesting and progressive ways. So that's also that it's just something else that people might not realize about franchising. When you invest in a brand, it may continue and likely will continue to evolve. I mean, there's a whole corporate support group that is working to help the business continue to grow and evolve and become more efficient behind the scenes. And that's something you don't get in an independent business. But yes, we're seeing a lot of growth in franchising. You might recall that many years ago, the in-home care franchises were really growing. And there's still many of them. I would say that, that's still a business that continues to grow and expand because of the demographics that we are seeing in this country. But just like an independent business, all franchise businesses started somewhere. They started as an independent business and then franchised. So, and entrepreneurs take advantage of and are looking to serve certain demographics in need, and they certainly are looking to expand into markets that where there's room for growth and innovation.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I was at a recent sort of happy hour with other professionals in that space, and every one of them was tied to a franchise.
Really?
Fascinating. Yeah, it was interesting. I had never sort of made that connection, and it kind of supports kind of what you were evidencing, that there was a growing expansion in that space, in the home in like long-term care or assisted living sort of space.
Oh, that is interesting.
Well, listen, I think it makes sense from at least the need that, as someone in the financial space, seeing that massive need as our country ages, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to support and help our fellow Americans help sort of gravitate toward that part of their lives. It's going to be a huge need, I'm sure. I'm seeing it certainly in the real estate space too.
Right. Well, it's interesting to see businesses tend to be developed that do fill needs and provide services that people need and want.
Well, that's why your business is serving needs for a while too. I mean, as people trying to get into businesses, I saw this thing the other day where it's so people are predicting. Used to be everyone was a owner in some respect or self-employed, whether it be farms or small businesses. And we sort of migrated to, these big monstrosities of businesses that are employing thousands and thousands of people. But I'm starting to sense it from a lot of folks, especially younger folks, and you may be able to attest to this, that they want to own their own sort of worlds in some respect and have more freedom in life, and we're migrating to more self-employment. People want that freedom. They don't want to be strapped to a job. And so are you starting to see that even for the younger generation?
Yes. In fact, I'm seeing that interest on both ends of the spectrum. I've recently worked with a client who invested in a business, and he was maybe 30, so pretty young relative to the typical client, I would say, that we'd been serving years ago. I think that I want to say as recently as 5 years ago, we were working more with clients who were a bit older, maybe older than, between 50 and 65, let's just say, where they were at that point in their career where whether it was their choice or not, they were looking for a new path from a career standpoint. But now we're working with a lot more young people that just want to have more control. They want to reap the rewards of their efforts. And they like the idea of being a business owner. And then also we're working with a lot of people who are, I guess, of that retirement age, whatever that is. I think in a lot of people's minds, it's 65, whatever that age is where you can start collecting Social Security. But I find that people at 65 are very youthful minded, and they don't feel like they want to stop working, and they want to be productive and engaged. And a lot of them are getting pressure, I think, from their corporate environments to sort of, move on. And people do not want to retire at 65. They don't want to play golf all day. I have a lot of clients who just want to be engaged, but they want to do something they enjoy that gives them fulfillment, and they want to be able to have some income so that they can protect their retirement savings and feel like, they're going to be more comfortable in their retirement. So we're seeing, I think, more of a broad demographic in terms of just interest in business ownership.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I love that. I mean, hearing things like that, because, we've been sort of pushed to say, hey, the pinnacle of our lives is get to retirement.
I know.
And then sit on the beach.
Then you can enjoy life, right?
And then you can actually enjoy some time. And I said, well, why can't you do that while you're, building up your wealth too?
Right. Ideally.
Why defer for 20, 30 years? It just, to me, hard to kind of connect, but we've been sort of trained that way, that's what we're supposed to be doing. So, and to your point, I think people, I love hearing that, like people who are getting older, maybe switching careers because, they want to do some good still on this earth. They still have value to give.
Right.
So it's like just a different mindset. So I love that you're seeing those sorts of people getting into this, because it's not what we're typically taught.
Right. The whole idea that you should just work for, 40 years and then not do anything. And I just don't think people are thinking that way these days.
No, I hope not. And, we do definitely preach that here. And it's one of those, like, hearing things like this as an option for folks, because I do feel there are more people recognizing that, working a job they don't like is not fulfilling enough, and it's every day is taking away a lot of their time and energy, and they are pursuing other things. So for someone who's maybe thinking about that, I mean, you mentioned the thought of maybe even starting something while they're working to kind of build up, which I think a lot of people do, like whether it's called a side hustle or whatever it is.
Right.
What are from maybe initial steps you would suggest that they consider or think about, as they go on this little exploratory journey to a franchise?
Well, I guess I can only think about what my experience was like, because I do think that for the average person, they don't quite understand the diversity that is available in the franchise sector. I know I didn't. I really felt, I thought that a specialty food business was even pretty unique back then versus, say, larger business like McDonald's or something. So I think that, I think that if I had someone that could have helped me and exposed me to what's out there, and to also help me understand the most efficient approach to learn about a business and to how to determine what would be a right fit. That would have been really helpful for me. And ultimately, that did happen because I ended up coming across this company. But otherwise, there's all kinds of sites you can go to, Franchise Gator, and, you can go on the web. But I think that adds to the overwhelm, quite honestly. So I just think that, it can be tricky because there's so much information out there. There's so much variety out there. How do you determine what is the best fit for you?
Yeah. And that's where it's we live in a world with so much access to information that actually, to your point, can be overwhelming, and it's hard to decipher what's true or not true. And that's why I, personally myself, I've grown to recognize that leveraging experts like yourself and others in their different spheres of knowledge and experience is so much more valuable. Google is a solution for a lot of things, at least to start. But sometimes you have to wade through the minutia and then kind of make a judgment call whether it's true or not. So that's a challenge. But
well, it'd be like somebody. I guess I could compare it to somebody who was trying to make their own investments. Think of all the options out there. How would you how would you even begin to narrow it down, really? I think it's similar because there are so many business options. How do you narrow it down?
That is true, and I think this is where having open mind and starting to talk to folks like yourself and others can help you at least direct you in a path that gets you closer, right? Because I think I often I think about things like this and starting a business. I think most people would love to do it if they thought it was possible.
Or even if they could explore in a non-threatening way where there was, no risk and no pressure. I think that that's also something people don't want to be in a sales process. They don't want to feel pressured. They don't want to feel like they're going to be forced to do anything. And because you can't blame them. I wouldn't want that either.
No, I agree with you. And this is why starting a business, maybe owning a franchise, is helping people to push the control sort of balance to their side more so in life. And so I would highly encourage. So, Carolyn, this has been great, wealth of nuggets and knowledge here. I know it's only the tip of the iceberg. So, how would folks who maybe are interested in learning more and consulting with you or others like you, like how best to reach out to you?
Well, certainly they could reach out to me. I have, of course, my contact information, phone number, email address. I have my own website. So I don't know if that's something that you publish on your podcast, but, that's certainly information that is public. So they could certainly reach out to me that way.
That's great. Yeah, we'll definitely put that in the show notes, and they can get essentially a free consultation from you and your team and figure out path forward.
Well, that would be great. Tom, this was so much fun. Thank you again for having me.
Oh, no, this was wonderful, and I appreciate you spending some time with me and sharing this. And certainly anyone who's interested in listening to this, I would highly encourage you to you can hear in Carolyn's voice, this is something she's very passionate about and super knowledgeable and can help you greatly on your path to financial freedom and maybe starting your own business as a franchisee. So highly encourage it. Thank you, Carolyn. Love it. Appreciate all your insights, and thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.